Electric Jam Podcast.
Greetings and salutations, everyone. Welcome to the Electric Jam Podcast. I'm Christopher, and I'm here with Richard. If you don't know who we are, check out our website in the description of the podcast. Electric Jam has guitar reviews, gear testing, and tons of info on recording. Richard, how are you today?
I'm doing very well. I'm very warm. It's pretty damn hot in the UK. It's like 28 degrees, it's about as hot as it gets. So pretty sweaty in my little office. And we had to turn the fan off as well because it was making too much noise. So it's now incredibly hot. Like I'm literally sweating just stood here doing nothing.
Yeah, I'm dying and I have AC. I have a little fan in my studio and I can't run that when I'm recording. And let's see.
Well, yeah, it's proper hot where you are though. I mean, this is
it's 33
choir boy stuff here.
It's 33 right now.
Okay, so it's not that much hotter.
Yeah, it's gonna get up to about 39 by noon.
Ooh, spicy.
Yeah, like it's 100.
It's 4 o'clock here now, so it's. I think the height of the heat's kind of died down a bit.
Yeah, you're past the worst of it. Yeah, it's like legendary heat. It hasn't been like this in forever, so it's kind of weird.
Well, since they started recording these kinds of things.
Right. Yeah. I mean, if you can go back a couple hundred years, but that's as far as you get. You know, it's too bad somebody back then, they recorded everything else. Why didn't they, like 2,000 years ago, start writing, hey, really hot today?
Yeah, super hot.
June 3rd, so that way we could go back a little bit further. But
it's a weird one, I guess. Maybe they just didn't really care. They were just like, we got better things to do, like die of typhus and scratches.
Yeah, I guess life was different back then. You had to worry about where you're going to sleep and where you're going to get food and all of that kind of stuff. Well,
they do show some pretty crazy fluctuations in the climate in the ice core samples, don't they, that they dig up at the North and South Pole. There's real massive like fluctuations in terms of the heat distribution around the Earth, and
you can see it in trees.
Yeah, big old trees.
Yeah, when you cut down the trees, you can see the rings, and you could tell how much precipitation and stuff like that there was. Science is really cool. But that's not our topic today. Our topic today is something that we kind of talk about a lot on every episode almost, but we've never just like outright presented you with a list of guitarists that really influenced us before we started playing, that made us want to pick up the instrument in the first place, And it's such a hard thing because I really had to dig, because I can't really remember a time when I didn't play guitar. I started at like 12 or 13 and I'm at least twice that now. So.
Yeah, I mean, I was a bit of a late bloomer. So I've always liked music, and I've always listened to guitar. I've always loved music, and I've always been around guitars because my dad played. So I've always been like tinkering on one, but I didn't really start playing, like putting my mind to it, into learning stuff and actually going, I need to probably try and get better at this, until I was in my like early 20s probably. So it was a while ago, but it was a while ago. It's basically half my life, more or less. So yeah, there's been changes along the way and stuff. But what I think is quite weird is that the ones that the most significant ones are still, to me anyway, are still as significant today as they were sort of, 20 years ago, which is pretty interesting. When you think of all the changes that have happened with music and, even with my own personal tastes and stuff like that, it's pretty interesting that the main ones are still pretty much the people I'll listen to, and I'll be like, oh, yes. It's like music to my ears.
Well, I did a little bit of research for this, and I got on Reddit for a little while and asked a few people, and you're right. Up until a point. I think up until, I guess, this generation now, people that are, 16 to 20, they kind of
people that are born after 2000.
Yeah, they kind of pull influence from everywhere, and I've heard some really interesting answers. Like Jack White comes up a lot because to them,
Yeah,
Jack White is like crap. That's classic rock to them.
He's a big one for me as well. I really love the way he plays. I know he gets a lot of shit, but I think he's great. I love his simplicity. I love the way the sounds he gets out of his guitar. I mean, I've seen him play live a few times, both with the Raconteurs and the White Stripes, and he's phenomenal. Like, he's a phenomenal guitarist, songwriter, singer, performer. He's one of the greats as far as I'm concerned.
I think he's crazy because he actually reached a point with guitar to where he was like, I've ran out of ideas, and then he started playing piano. What was that?
Yeah,
the fourth or the fifth White Stripes album? I think it was the last.
They just started bringing in more stuff, but I think generally with him, he's just he just needs to have something to tinker with, I think. And once you're kind of exhausted the guitar, it's adding in another element, another sound that, complements. Because he never fell with the White Stripes. Because the White Stripes are a weird one for me. Like, I love them as the band, and but their albums, every single one of them, it's got like some really good tracks on it. But there's always these like, I always find they have a lot of filler on their albums, which I don't particularly care for. So it's almost like I have a playlist of all the White Stripes songs that I like, taken off all the albums, and just all the bad ones removed, like the ones that are like filler and they're just not very good. So
the singles were always killer. Like every single they ever released was amazing. Like Hardest Button to Button, or Seven Nation Army, or Fell in Love with a Girl, Hotel Yorba. All of those.
Dead Leaves on a Dirty Ground. That's like the best Doom riff of all time. You ever played that on distortion with like a down-tuned guitar? It's such a good doom metal riff. It's amazing.
It really is, because it's got that cool descending part. Yeah,
it's great. It's great. You stick like an octave fuzz on that. It sounds badass. I think he's very much of his time, isn't he? He's like the Jimmy Page influence is massive with him. There's quite a lot of blues in there, a bit of country, bluegrass, but mainly it's Jimmy Page. I'd say is Jack White's kind of biggest. He sounds most like Jim. Like, you can hear a lot of Led Zeppelin in his riffs and the way he plays.
I think it's because they had the same influences. Because Jimmy Page was listening to a lot of Muddy Waters and Son House and Buddy Guy,
but I would
like
say
that.
Yeah, but I mean, Jimmy Page is about 30 years older than Jack White, so I'd say
right. Yeah, but Jack was into the older stuff.
Well, that's what he says, but he's probably just listened to Zeppelin. And then as he got older, he needed to be cooler and be like, well, no, I like all these old school blues guys that you've never heard of. Like, because people do that. They can't just be like, oh, I like Led Zeppelin. Led Zeppelin are great, because everyone likes Led Zeppelin. It doesn't really make you any special. I
don't know. I kind of believe them, because on their first album they covered a couple of deep cuts.
I'm only messing. He's probably got very eclectic taste. I'd never say any bad words about Jack.
But we're kind of going backwards. So, what's the first album that you can think of that you were listening to when you were, I don't know, formative years? Let's say 10 to 14. And you were like, oh my God, this is amazing. This guitar
Queen.
Stuff. Oh my God,
Queen.
It's the same answer.
Yeah, my mum used to listen to Queen a lot, and I used to in the car, so I always used to listen to it, and that was my first exposure to like a kind of rock guitar, like screaming, pushed amps with a kind of like wailing lead. And that was my first kind of experience with it. But then my dad, he was into kind of like King Crimson. So I always really liked Robert Fripp, but some of that's quite weird for a 10-year-old. But as I got older and then more kind of approachable stuff, again, it kind of opened up a few things in my head. And I was like, okay, this is very technical. But then he also does like a lot of like classical stuff, like Gypsy Kings and like flamenco players and stuff like that. So I had kind of like a weird kind of, smorgasbord of guitar styles foisted upon me from like quite a young age. But the first time I was ever kind of like, wow, I remember being like dazzled was hearing Queen. Like some of the heavier tracks, not heavy, but the more rocking ones.
Oh yeah.
And at the end, and seeing Brian May with his like wall of amps and his little tiny guitar just sort of strutting around. So yeah, there's basically Queen. I'd say Queen, and then if I was being pretentious, I'd say it was Robert Fripp, but it's not. It was Queen, because Queen's fun. It's like fun music. You can like bob your head to it. It's kind of got pop. It's pop, but it's also got like that rock and roll edge.
They do everything.
Yeah, they straddle both worlds. I mean, they're a flawless band. They had one of the greatest singers of all time, one of the greatest guitarists of all time, and the bass track and the bass and drum are like two of the tightest, rhythm sections that have ever walked the earth. I mean, they don't do anything, needlessly complicated, but what they do is, iconic. I mean, you can't fault that.
So that's funny.
It's so simple, but it's so good.
I had 2 albums before I got the Queen's Greatest Hits album for my birthday, and my mother was a musician, so she got me into kind of the popular stuff at the time. She really liked Bon Jovi, so I had Bon Jovi. I had Pyromania by Def Leppard, and I remember the song Too Late for Love. I was like, that guitar riff is awesome. And then, I got Queen's Greatest Hits. I think I was like 10 or 11 years old. My mom got it for me for my birthday, and she was like, I know you like all the heavy stuff, but this pretty much covers everything, And I was like, okay, yeah, sure, I'll listen to it. And, I knew Bohemian Rhapsody because Wayne's World had just came out. And they had some heavy songs on there, though, like Headlong or Hammer to Fall. That's a pretty heavy song. And then all the stuff that they did for the Highlander movie. Man, I love those songs.
Highlander? I didn't know that.
Yeah, they did the soundtrack. Who Wants to Live Forever?
Oh, right. Okay. I haven't seen the Highlander film for a long, long time. And I didn't realize that they did the soundtrack for it.
Yeah, It's a Kind of Magic. And what else was in those movies? They did everything. I can't remember the name of the song now.
Which one? Wait,
Princes of the Universe.
I've never heard of that. We didn't have TV in the UK when I was little, though. We had 4 channels, so the selection was pretty limited. Yeah, we didn't really get much film, so I don't really remember ever watching TV when I was a kid, because there was only 4 channels, I think, in the UK, and then Channel 5 came out. And that was kind of a big deal, because it was like, whoa, another channel. What are we going to do? So, yeah, there was not really much on. And obviously films were on kind of late at night. So, yeah, I don't really remember watching it. You had to go to the cinema to watch films when I was a little kid, like kids stuff, because it just wasn't on TV. So, yeah, I probably missed all that. But no, they do have some really heavy songs, like Son and Daughter, Ogre Battle, Stone Cold Crazy. They're all pretty heavy.
Crazy, yeah. Metallica covered it.
Yeah, exactly, yeah.
And they didn't change a thing about it at all.
Why would you?
And it's still just perfect and heavy, yeah. I don't know. They kind of created their own genre. Like Queen is their own thing, and after that, I think Nirvana blew up, and Nirvana was the one where I was like, okay, that's it. I'm getting a guitar.
Yeah,
like, that's it. That's the end.
Yeah, actually, Nirvana was one for me too. Actually, because I think I was 10. I was in 1994. I would have been 10 years old. So it was when I first started. I didn't think I came across them until I was about sort of 12 or 13. But I remember seeing the T-shirts and things, and and sort of getting, it was kind of a thing. But obviously, because the internet didn't really exist, well, it didn't exist then, it was kind of hard to get access to anything that wasn't on the radio or your parents listened to. So you go on to, but then I met this guy in school who, his dad was into like serious like rock music, like Metallica, Maiden, all that kind of stuff. And then he was like, have you heard this? Have you heard this? And I was like, no. And I was like, he kept showing me, and I was like, wow. So that was really cool. And that's kind of where Nirvana, and I'm pretty certain he showed me the Melvins as well, but I didn't really get into them until much later. But I'm sure he did. Because I remember the first time I heard them, I was like, I am sure I've heard this before when I was like a lot younger. So who knows? But either way, yeah.
Yeah, I was in that weird in-between generation, though, to where we kind of grew up with the hair metal stuff. And then by the time I was a teenager, Nirvana had taken over. And that was like the anti-hair metal, you know? And
yeah,
I had a weird CD collection. It was like Def Leppard, Motley Crue, and then Pearl Jam, Nirvana, Alice in Chains, Tool. I had Undertow when it first came out, and I did not understand what I was listening to. That one took, I don't know, I think I had that on my CD rack for maybe a year and a half before I really dug into it.
Oh, really? I quite like Tool off the bat. I was pretty taken with them straight away. But because obviously I'm slightly younger than you, I kind of missed all that. And it was mainly, so when I was like coming up, sort of musically speaking, it was kind of Britpop. So you had like Oasis and Blur, and obviously like Nirvana and grunge was kind of coming over too. So it was kind of the good stuff, really. I missed all the crap in the 80s because I was too young, and the really early 90s stuff. And then, yeah, it just kind of hit the ground running with like grunge, and then new metal happened, and then that was pretty interesting. But then you got some like cool bands out of that too. So, you know, like Deftones, they were like one of the first bands I was like really like, wow, I really, really, really like this band. Like the first time I was like, wow, they really opened my eyes to, you know, heavier, more alternative kind of approach to it, because they weren't like classical metal like Metallica or Sabbath. They were a bit different. It was like alternative, I guess. It wasn't, I would never put them in with the new metal quartet of people, but obviously that's where they came up through. So yeah, so it was kind of an interesting time. But I think in terms of guitar players that came out of there, for me, mine are, you know, because you have like Queens of the Stone Age, that was like mid to late 90s, Caius, and that was a big one for me. I absolutely loved both of those bands, and mainly Josh Homme, because I love the way he plays guitar. Like him and Jack White, like two of my favorites.
And they're very similar.
Yeah, that's it. It's that I like that. I like the way they're not. I've never been into like this virtuoso stuff. Like I've never really liked Steve Vai, or, you know, I've never listened to any Steve Vai. I never put it on and been like, oh, I need to listen to that. Or you know, I have an appreciation for it, but because I can't do it, but I don't also have any desire to learn how to do it either. It's like I listen to Metallica. Like I love James Hetfield, the way he plays, his style, his rhythm, you know, his technique. I was
about to say that.
But like Kirk, I kind of care less. I mean, if Kirk wasn't in the band, I wouldn't really care. If it was just James and the bass player, and we'll get rid of Lars as well if we're getting rid of Kirk and get a good drummer in, then it would be. To me, it'd probably be just as good, maybe better. I mean, if they got rid of Lars, it'd be way better. But yeah, I kind of prefer that simple kind of like rhythm. That's why I like Kurt as well, because it's about the rhythm, it's about the riff. It's not about speed or technicality. It's just like creating a song that's memorable and like kind of noteworthy. I think that's harder to do than like ripping through, you know, the pentatonic scale at 1,000,000 miles an hour.
It really is, and I think that's why. So my top three. Unfortunately, Brian May is going to get left out, but he was in there. But my top three that made me want to pick up guitar, and the first three that I really studied and learned how to play this stuff, was definitely first Slash. After Use Your Illusion came out, I was like, that's amazing. Second was definitely James Hetfield. And it's funny that you said that too, because I mean, I like Kirk's solos, but James's rhythm is just next level, and his riffs are so memorable. Like, you shouldn't be able to hum a speed metal riff.
Yeah, exactly. That's what I mean. It's
but then
like he is Metallica. It's him. It's his right hand that is Metallica. The rest is, you could swap and change him, and it wouldn't really make that much difference.
And then I guess number 3 would probably be Kurt Cobain, that's 3 wildly different areas of guitar. But the thing, and
what about Jimmy?
I got into that later.
The actually. 2 Jimmys.
Yeah, the 2 Jimmys. I got into that later. Like I'd already been playing guitar.
Okay. Yeah, that makes sense. I mean, I was kind of listening to them because, again, through my parents, they both liked Zeppelin and Hendrix. My mum actually saw them play together, which I cannot believe. And she was kind of just like, yeah, it wasn't a big deal. My brother dragged me there. And I can't remember who the other support band was. There was 3 bands and they were all incredible, but it was Jimi Hendrix and Zeppelin. And I was just like, wow. And it was in wasn't in a big venue either. It was, she said, about 200, 300 people there, tops.
Yeah, my dad saw Bad Company in Boston together, opening for, I think, Skynyrd. And I was like, that's the most amazing show I've ever heard of. I know it was Bad Company in Boston for sure. And
no way.
Was like, yeah, it was a good night. I'm like, no.
The OG Skynyrd as well. I would love to have seen them. They're one of my favorite bands.
I was like, no,
pure guitar.
That was a legendary night. What are you talking about? Bad Company and Boston on the same stage with each other? Like, that didn't blow your mind? And he's like, yeah, it was pretty cool. What?
Yeah.
Because, Brad...
He probably had like 17 beers and doesn't really remember it, so he feels bad about it.
Right. And, Brad Delp killed himself, unfortunately. So... after his suicide, I don't think Boston was ever the same, which sucks, Yeah,
well,
his first 3 albums are just, they're amazing. They changed music production forever.
Yeah,
but,
yeah, totally.
Yeah, those are my 3 for sure. Slash, because he could write a solo that I mean, I can hum the entirety of November Rain, and I think you're onto something with it being catchy. And just a little bit flashy, but not so overly technical that it goes over everyone's head.
Yeah, it's the same with anything. For me, it like take someone like Steve Vai, right? He is an incredible guitarist. I'm not saying he's not, because he is. He's probably one of the best in the world. But do I enjoy listening to it? No, not even a little bit. Yeah, I'd rather listen to like Aphex Twin than that. If I want to listen to something that's just literally just all over the place with no real kind of, something, I'd just rather listen to electronic music. I just don't find it's the same with that Tim, what's his name? Tim Henson dude. Like, he's a phenomenal player, but it doesn't really do kind of anything for me. The only one that does is I quite like Animals as Leaders. But I think, again,
that goes back to that rhythm thing. Yeah,
he's got his rhythms really good. Like, he's all about the hooks, and they're quite, I don't want to use the D word, but they're quite genty, and they kind of like lean into that sort of like Miss Sugar kind of where you can sort of nod your head to it, but it's a bit offbeat, and it kind of brings it back in. It's not just like fret wanking for the sake of fret wanking. It's like he's actually doing something with it. And I think that's the difference. And I think that's, to me anyway, why it appeals to me a little bit more so than somebody like, Steve Vai or Tim Henson, who are both amazing and better than I'll ever be. But it's just my personal kind of perspective I'm always, I'm a Hetfield, not Hammett kind of guy. I'm all about the rhythm and the riffs.
I guess I'm a little bit of both, but I think what happened on my end is I started with those guys and then I tried the other stuff, and I got to the point to where I could do it on guitar. I'm not saying I'm as good as Steve Vai or anything, but I know how to play For the Love of God almost all the way through. And that's probably his catchiest song. Everything else is just like, wow, But I don't know. I guess it's because I came from that simplicity in the beginning to where Slash plays, I don't know, 3 or 4 or 5 notes and just lets it ring out. And it sounds amazing. That once I learned how to do the shredding thing, I had to kind of dial it back, and I had to kind of
well, I think
myself.
That's it. That you've hit the nail on the head there. I think because it's such a difficult thing to learn to do, it's like once you've learned to do it, that's all you want to do. Because you're like, well, I've spent like 10 years trying to learn to do this. Of course I'm going to play all the time. Because why wouldn't you? You've invested a huge amount of time of your life and energy into learning the technique, which is a very hard technique to do. So of course you're going to do it. That's why that's one of my main problems with YouTube is whenever I try and watch a tutorial, if the tutorial starts with someone literally just ripping through some insane guitar riff, technical guitar, I bounce straight away because I'm like, I don't want to watch you playing guitar for 5 minutes when I've clicked on this to learn something about how to do something specific. I don't need to see you doing this. You know, it's
right.
all about you. You know, you megalomania. It's just like, look how good I am. God. And I know people do it to kind of like ingratiate themselves to the person that's watching so they know that they're an expert. But yeah, that's a bit of a pet peeve for me. I don't want to have to sit through like 3 minutes of some guy just, rubbing the paintwork off his guitar before he tells me what I'm looking for.
Well, I kind of found a balance. And that's why I like people like Nick Johnston. I'm a real big fan of his because he knows when to kind of unleash the fury of, like a million notes. And then he knows when to just dial it back and just stick to something very, very simple. And if you listen to his entire catalog, like I'd say 80% of every single one of his songs is very, very simple. And then 30 seconds of something amazing. And then he dials it right back. And so that's how I kind of started. I don't know. I guess I had to temper myself in a way. Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
No, but I think humans as creatures are naturally drawn towards, because obviously you've got like the theory and the philosophy of like aesthetics and things like that, and beauty and whatnot, and that does apply to sound and frequencies and things like that. And I think humans are drawn to things that are simple but beautiful or engaging or captivating at the same time. That's why all the best sound.
10,000 pictures of a sunset.
Exactly. And with music, I think it's obviously a different medium, but it works. So if you look at like the most popular guitar riffs or songs of all time, it's like some of them like really annoy me. Like the one that really annoys me is when people say Kashmir is the best guitar riff of all time by Led Zeppelin. I'm like, that's not even one of Led Zeppelin's best guitar riffs. No. It like really pisses me off because it's like I can name like 15 riffs by Jimmy Page that are better than Kashmir. And everyone's always like, "Oh, Kashmir is the greatest guitar riff of all time." It's like, it's really not. I mean, it's not. It's not even close.
It's a cool riff.
It's a cool song, but it's not even like top 5 Zeppelin.
No, I'm with you on that. I think Heartbreaker, Black Dog. What's some other ones that are kind of weird? I mean, you could even say the End of Stairway when that gets heavy. That's really cool. I don't know that. Yeah, there's so many other options there. Yeah, it's funny.
Yeah, people go. But that's what I mean. But what my point is that people are naturally drawn towards kind of things that are like quite simple, which I think why there is this sort of and this is something that's kind of exclusive to metal as well, because if you show somebody who doesn't listen to metal like some mad soloing, like Steve Vai kind of stuff, they'll just be like, no, I don't like this. Or you show them something insanely heavy, like Dillinger Escape Plan or Converge, they'll be like, oh no, I don't like this at all, because it's very complicated and it's very fast, and there's not really anything you can. You if you're not used to that, it's completely novel. So your brain can't even like latch onto something like a popular chord change or something. It's just a cacophony of noise. And I think that's kind of why even some people like me who consider themselves metalheads and have listened to metal for like decades, I still have, you know, it doesn't really kind of grates on me a little bit, the real, you know, fret wankery stuff. But, but that's just me, you know. That's just me. I think, you know, each to their own. But for me personally, because we're talking about, you know, what we like in terms of plays and stuff, I've always been much more kind of like the blues, kind of like rock blues infused riffs. That's kind of why I like bands like I Hate God, because they have that, even though they're heavy and horrible and sludgy as hell, they have their guitar riffs it's just like sleazy blues rock with down-tuned guitars and like massive amounts of distortion.
Yeah, it's the same thing with Corrosion of Conformity.
Yeah, exactly. Another good one. It's just that blues riff, like something you can tap your foot to and nod your head to, which is, you know, deeply influenced by like Jimmy Page. You know, even Sabbath. It's like Sabbath is just blues, slow blues.
Oh yeah, for sure. I was telling a student about the song Albatross by Corrosion of Conformity, and I was like, it's such a great song and it's so heavy. But I said, if you strip it down and you try to play it on an acoustic, it sounds like a blues song. And I demonstrated it for him, and I was like, it sounds really heavy because there's a lot of distortion on the guitars. They're playing through a Marshall stack, you know, with
obviously,
Gibson Les Paul. It's gonna be heavy. But yeah, if you strip it down to its bare bones, Albatross is just a blues song. Especially the da 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 da. You know, I mean, it's like
they are. Well, I was listening to a band I've listened to for a long time. This morning it was Unsane. I don't know if you ever got into them, but they're fantastic, kind of like alt metal band. And I was listening to Viz Queen album, that's my favorite one, I think, of theirs. And I proper forgot how good it is. And I was like, you know what, I'm gonna try and learn some of this on the guitar today. And again, I sat down, I was just on an acoustic. I was just kind of learning the rhythm and the pattern. And it's just blues. It really is just blues. And I think that's the difference, I think. Because I can't remember who was saying it when he was talking about new metal. I can't remember who it was. It was some guy. But he was saying that the thing that made new metal so different and novel was that none of the guitarists, the big bands like Korn or whoever you want to name, had any kind of like blues influence in it. There was just none.
Rick Beato.
Was it? Oh, was it? Okay, Uncle Rick.
Yep.
Big Rick.
It was Uncle Rick. Yeah, he was saying, the singing and the guitar riffs didn't have any blues in it, and that's what made new metal. Because I mean, think about Korn. A lot of their riffs are chromatic. You know. They're like fret 2, fret 3, fret 4, and then that's the riff. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, there's no blues in that. And that's what made new metal interesting, because it was a fresh, completely different type of sound. And I don't know.
Here's a poll question for who is the best new metal guitarist. I know who I'm gonna say, but it doesn't matter about the band. It doesn't matter about the music. It's about them as a player and kind of their ability. I'm gonna say Wes Borland, because he's fantastic on the guitar. Even though Limp Bizkit, you stick him in any other band, he'd be fantastic, because he can really play and he's very inventive as well.
I was going to say he played with Danny Elfman for a little while, so yeah. I was going to say Wes Borland, but I was also going to say Brian Welch.
Was Brian the one that got the tattoo on his hand?
Head
on his
from
teeth?
Korn.
But didn't he leave Korn and go join some kind of religious cult for a bit, and then he came back?
Well, he became a born-again Christian, and he did an album. I forget what the name of it was.
I remember it was head to God or something. It was something really cheesy. It was a play on words, but it was about heading up to Jesus or something, or God. I can't remember which one it was. It was something like that.
It was much more subtle than that.
I don't think it was. I think you're giving him way too much credit.
Look it up. But his solo stuff showed that he was kind of, I don't know, like the brains behind Korn.
Yeah, he's a really good guitarist.
Love and Death. That was the name of it.
I think he might have had a website called Head to God or something. Because I definitely remember it was Head to God or Head to something. And I'm going to need to Google this because this is doing my day.
Yeah, I just had to Google too. Love and Death sounded like Korn, but I don't know. I kind of like his vocals better. He was always a vocalist in Korn. He always sang in Korn, but yeah, I don't know.
Okay, yeah, I never listened to that.
You could tell when he left Korn because their sound just, I don't know, it lost a lot of the.
It wasn't anywhere near as creative. Yeah, it kind of just became like music by numbers. Like we've got these riffs. Let's just slightly rejig them for new albums.
Well, and then they did the whole dubstep album, which I don't know. You can take it or leave it.
Yeah, that's like Machine Head's rap metal album. Everyone's got one.
Oh man, what was that one?
I don't know. It's Machine Head, a strange band.
Yeah, because their first album is so amazing.
Yeah,
I know that was one of them. That was definitely one that shaped my guitar playing. Now that I look back at it, "Burn My Eyes" was the name of it. And that very Davidian first song, Davidian, yeah.
Yeah,
it's so heavy.
It's probably, I think his debuts go. I think that's probably one of the best of all time. It's up there. I reckon it's definitely top 10 because it's so good front to back. Like there's not like a weak bit on it.
They shot themselves in the foot though, because there was nowhere to go after that. Like every song on that album was so perfect. Like where do you go after that? Well,
you do new metal and start rapping. That's where you go, Chris. Go where the money is. You do what the lovely people at your record label tell you to do. Yeah. So, I mean, I do like that album. I don't particularly like Machine Head that much, I would say now. I mean, that album is good though. That album is very, very good. But they're not a band I'd put on and be like, oh yeah, I want to fancy some Machine Head right now. I mean, he's a good player though. I mean, Christ, he sings and plays, and some of the riffs are huge. Not particularly. The other stuff's a bit, hit and miss.
So yeah, I guess my three are James Hetfield, Slash, and definitely Kurt Cobain. What would you say your three that got you playing would be?
Jimmy Page, because I've always loved Zeppelin since pretty much as long as I can remember, and mainly because of his guitar. I'm going to say Josh Homme. I particularly in the last, like from when I was about 20 onwards, because that was when, because I really loved the stuff in Caius, and then the first Queen's Stone Age album is the first three Queen's albums are basically like that's like if I could play guitar. So if I could basically just have the ability to play guitar in any way, it would be the way he plays on those three albums, because I think it's got kind of like that punk, simple, but really memorable. The lead's really good. And the riffs are great. Like there's just so many good riffs across those albums. It's like unreal.
Mexicola. Mexicola is so
Regular
heavy.
John. I mean, it's so simple, but it's just so good. It's just so
one chord.
Exactly, yeah.
Or Avon.
Yeah. There were these. There's so many. That's what I mean. It's like they're across the, and also you think that and also the Caius albums as well. So there's basically 6 albums of across the two bands where he's just literally just crapping out like some of the best riffs ever put on record. And they're not technical and they're not fancy. They're just awesome. They got like a swagger to them that you literally can't learn. I don't think. I think you either have it or you don't. It's like the way some people have like a cool walk. You know what I mean? It's like some people just have a good walk. It's the same with guitar playing. I think you've either got that like innate swagger about the way you play guitar, because you can't learn that. You can learn all the notes and the scales and the fretboard, but it's that rhythm thing. If you haven't got that like natural kind of magic in your right hand or your left hand if you're a lefty, then it's, all bets are off. But yeah, I'd say, definitely him. And then maybe
It's hard
to do 3 because it's kind of like, because it's quite a lot. I like quite a lot of the music I listen to a lot, and when I like to play guitar, it's kind of tends to be not what I normally listen to, if that makes sense. Like, I love Skinner. Like, I really like a lot of like Leonard Skinner. I love their guitar work. I don't know. It's really hard. I like Robert Fripp. It's like a big one. I really, really love his guitar because it goes from being like beautiful and amazing and memorable and simple to just absolutely just bonkers. Like the most bonkers guitar you've ever heard in your life.
Okay, I can get on with that.
But that's like I remember the first time I heard like 21st Century Schizoid Man, and I thought it was like the greatest song I've ever heard in my life, and it pretty much is. I mean, if you put that on now, it stands. It's so good, like front to back. And then there's loads of like stories and mythos about them playing it live because it's just a complete mess to do live because there's no click tracks. It's all done. No one really knows who's leading. It just kind of like ambles along, and then all the trumpets come in and.
Did you ever hear the cover of it from the guy who used to be in Tool?
No.
The guy who played before Justin Chancellor. The guy that was on Undertow. Paul D'Amour.
Paul D'Amour.
Paul D'Amour.
Yeah. No, I never.
So he had another band called Peach, and their big hit was a song called "You Lied," and Tool covered that also.
Okay, I mean, Adam Jones is a big one for me as well. Like, I really like his playing.
They covered Schizoid Man. And
no way. That's like the uncoverable.
They did a really good job of it. They did an amazing job. You could see why they picked him to play in Tool.
Yeah.
But yeah, I'll have to send that album to you.
It's really hard to pick 3. Like, really, really, really hard. Because everything's kind of... It's so specific to different things. Like for me,
you can get into like the second generation, you know, like how about after you had already picked up the guitar?
Yeah, I mean, there's tons, there's loads. I mean, like Brent Hines from Mastodon, he's been a big one for a long time because ever since like Blood Mountain, I've been kind of obsessed with the way he plays because he's kind of got that country swagger combined with like metal. And to me, that's like somebody who's like big Leonard Skinner fan, kind of classic rock like Zeppelin and stuff. It's kind of it's such a nice mix of styles, and I think that's what makes Mastodon so different and so lauded. Is partly because of him and his kind of eclectic style that he brings to it. Kurt Cobain definitely is one, I'd say, because that was one of my first kind of real experiences with like sort of heavy music. Like heavier music anyway. But like all the kind of like obvious ones, like, you know, Johnny Ramone, Carlos Santana, you know, all that kind of stuff is not really my thing. But like, then there's the Beatles, you know, like the Beatles. I mean, that's a huge, massive influence because they're fantastic. The guitar work on those albums, particularly like George Harrison, the lead stuff is incredible. And John is always really good.
Than you would think.
It's way more complicated than you think. Yeah, I mean, everyone says in Beatles music's simple and easy is just an idiot because there's so many layers to it. Particularly George Harrison's bits on the later stuff. He's constantly doing stuff. He's all over the place.
That's what I was going to say. Everybody in the Beatles played guitar, but live, if you listen to what George was doing. He was doing some really interesting stuff. He would be doing chord inversions and arpeggiated little lines here and there. And mainly what you're listening to, if you're just a casual listener, is John's guitar, which is the rhythm. Yeah. He's holding down the chords. But if you listen to the other parts, it's like, wow, this song is busy. But you don't really notice unless you're a guitar player.
Or you take it away. If you took it away, it'd be a completely different song.
Yeah, you're right. Absolutely.
And it would be nowhere near as good as it was. That is not like a Kirk Hammett situation. You couldn't get rid of George Harrison and the Beatles would be the same. They would be infinitely worse. They would be nowhere near as good. They wouldn't even be the Beatles.
You could have gotten rid of Ringo.
I'd say Ringo's better in terms of drummers, like drummers who are considered to be notoriously bad. I think he gets a bit of a bum rap. I don't think he's that bad for that music. I think they don't think you need to be a particularly great drummer to play like the Beatles, kind of like that pop rock music. Like if he was in, I don't know, Dream Theater or something, maybe. But on Meshuggah, you could imagine Ringo just sort of ambling his way through a Meshuggah track. Is this right? Yeah, okay. But
like Octopus Garden, like I don't know.
But that was his song.
Let him.
He had like one song. He could do like but he could do like one song every album. And part of the Beatles' appeal, and this is the thing, and this is a theory I have of why they've stayed relevant, or one of the reasons why they've stayed relevant, is because a lot of their songs are like very like kid favorite songs. Like my son loved. He loves some of their songs. I'll put like an album on, and then he'll be like, "Oh, put that on." Like he loves Yellow Submarine. He loves that song so much. And All Together Now, it's just like we used to listen to that every day to school for about 8 months. Every morning, stick it on, and it's a great way to start the day. Actually, it makes you really happy. But they have like each one of the albums have got like one or two like tracks that are almost like kids music because they're so happy and twee, and they've got lots of like interesting noises going on. And Octopus's Garden is one of them. I
could see that. Yeah.
But he liked to sing but he also liked to sing. He had like a deal, I think, that he could do like one song on each album. And they obviously weren't going to give him the good one, were they? So.
Well, I mean, it's funny, like Across the Universe and stuff like that is also kind of, I don't know. You could almost put that song in a Disney movie, and it would kind of fit. I think you're right.
Yeah, but it's timeless music. It's kind of got a classic, almost timelessness appeal to it.
I think the funny part is when they were writing that stuff, that is definitely the time when they were doing drugs.
Yeah, obviously. Yeah, I mean, 100%.
Which makes it better. Like when they were doing the poppy, straightforward stuff, that was the before drugs, and then after drugs, it kind of sounds like a Disney movie all of a sudden.
Yeah, and they got into all their sort of Eastern philosophy and all that kind of stuff. So kind of
I think that was mainly
consciousness
George.
Expanding. No, I think they're all into the Vedic stuff, weren't they? They were big into it.
So if you had to say like,
there's too many. It's like even like I was just thinking then it's like Richie Blackmore.
That's a great choice
from Deep Purple. I mean, again, Deep Purple don't get that much kind of respect these days because they're still going and they still tour and stuff, and they haven't. But it's some of the riffs he wrote are like just ridiculous. And then he had his solo career as well in Rainbow, which they were massive too.
Yeah, Rainbow.
But like Hush by Deep Purple is like one of my favorite songs of all time. It has like one of the best bass lines in it of all time, and some awesome guitar work too.
Pink Floyd's up there for me too.
Exactly. That's what I mean. It's impossible to say. Like there's sort of seminal bands that from each era. There's like a handful of bands from every like 20 years that kind of pick up the mantle and carry it forwards to the next 20 years, and somebody else comes along and they kind of take a little bit of the people before them, and then they pass it on, and then the next people take a little bit of what they had and a little bit of those guys, and then they take it on again. So yeah, it is hard. It's really hard to pin down. It's really hard to say.
That's one of those things too, where I don't know. I've met a lot of guys that are like, I'm a metal guitarist, and it seems like that's all that they really listen to, and that's
just
all that they really play.
Yeah,
and in that kind of case, then yeah, you are a guitarist. That's what you are, but you're not a musician. I think to be a musician, you have to have kind of a wide palette like that. You've got to be able to listen to the Beatles, Led Zeppelin, Guns N' Roses, Metallica, Meshuggah, Nirvana, Pearl Jam, and be able to appreciate it all. You know what I mean? And then draw something from that.
You have to be a connoisseur, don't you, of music? You can't just be, it's like if you say you're into food. What do you eat? Oh, I just eat pizza. It's like, well, you're not then, are you?
Yeah, you're not very much of a foodie.
You're not much of a foodie if you just eat pizza. You've got to eat everything, and you've got to listen to everything. That's kind of the point. You draw a line, like obviously things like just commodified, manufactured, useless, throwaway music is obviously not worth the time of day. But, you know, genre-wise, you know, it's fun. I love listening to stuff that I wouldn't normally, like finding new bands that I wouldn't normally listen to. One of my favorite things is when, you know how sometimes like a band or an artist kind of just gets through the cracks and you never really listen to them, but they've been around for like 30 years. And you never get around to listen to them, and then eventually you kind of just go, you know, screw it, I'm going to spend a week and get into this band. And there's been loads of them over the years for me, where I've just kind of gone and listened to everything and been like, oh yeah, I get it now. Like the Grateful Dead was one for me. Like I used to hear about them all the time, like the Grateful Dead, you know. And I was like, I've heard a couple of their tunes, but I've never actually listened to like any of their back catalogue. I remember, I think it was like 2 years ago or 3 years ago, I just spent like about 2 weeks just listening to the Grateful Dead pretty much all day. And it's great. I love it. It was brilliant. I was kind of like, oh my God, I would love to have been alive like in the 70s, just touring, watching these guys play in some huge festival and Free Love and Sun's Out.
See, that's why I didn't say Jimmy Page or Jimi Hendrix, because I think I was 16 or 17 when I got into that. Like I was more in the present when it came to guitar stuff, and then
I know what you mean.
Started going backwards. You know, I started going backwards a little bit, and I remember I got Physical Graffiti and Led Zeppelin 4 from a friend of mine, and I was like, you know what, Led Zeppelin's apparently amazing. Let's see what it's all about. And I put on
Zeppelin 4. Because everyone that you were listening to at the time are probably like, when they talk about their influences, they were probably saying Jimmy Page, Jimi Hendrix, Tony Iommi. Because that's how it was. Like Hetfield is Iommi, you know, Motorhead. Kind of like they reference their influences, and then you're referencing them as an influence, and then you start referencing their, which is kind of what I was saying before, how everything kind of just passes forwards, and you just kind of have this distillation of sounds, but there's always a constant. Which is what makes new metal so weird, because blues has always been a constant in rock and roll metal music, and then it just kind of goes, it just like hit that brick wall. It's like, no, it's like everyone's just decided, no way, no, we're not doing that anymore. So yeah,
it is an anomaly. I don't know. I guess we need something like that again. We were talking about that before. What's the next big thing going to be?
Well, it's hard now because of the way the music works. It's not the same. Everything's like, even a really niche band now that I've never heard of and you've never heard of, and I could live the rest of my life and never hear them, could have, you know, 10 million followers on Instagram and Spotify, and I would just never have heard of them. They could be selling out arenas. I never will have heard of them. Whereas, you know, 20 years ago, that kind of level of stuff, you're talking like Radiohead or, you know, like big bands that were, whereas now, because everything's so niched down and niches and within niches, and then there's enough people online to fill all of these niches, everyone's, you know, it's hard, almost hard to see how there could be like these huge, you know, because you've obviously got like Taylor Swift and stuff like that, which are like cultural global phenomenons. But in terms of like bands and stuff, it's quite tricky to see, like, say, like another like Radiohead coming along. Do you know what I mean? With like a long legacy of like 20 years, and then they kind of just disappear, and then they're still kind of talked about and referenced and stuff. Do you know what I mean? It's weird that's because all the bands now that are kind of in, like, for instance, metal, that are big and established, they've kind of all been around for like 20 years, like Mastodon, Tool, Deftones, and obviously there's a lot of up and coming bands and new bands that are really good too. But it's like, are they, you know, it's hard to pick which one's going to be like the new Mastodon, for instance, because everyone was like, right. I remember when the Sword came out, everyone was like, oh yeah, the Sword, they're going to be, and they were great, they were awesome, but then they just kind of just petered out and disappeared, and then became nothing.
Same thing with Priestess. I remember Priestess was going to be the new big thing, and they were going to, you know, take the place of Queens of the Stone Age, and they had, I don't know, 2 or 3 really great hits, and then just kind of disappeared.
Yeah, it's really, it'd be hard to track the next big boys, but I'm sure they're out there, and there is some really great bands around now too. So it's just, yeah, it's weird. I can't see how it's very hard to see like a band going, like a kind of classic kind of rock band, metal band, going to be like an arena band now. Do you know what I mean? Like of the Foo Fighters level, because it took the Foo Fighters 20 odd years to get to where they are now. And it's kind of the same with the Chili Peppers. It's not like they just kind of they've always been popular. Like they were popular, but not to the level they are like now after decades.
Right. Yeah, they didn't get that until, I don't know, Stadium Arcadium or whatever came out in the early 2000s. And they had already been a band since, I don't know, 1986.
Yeah,
you know?
Exactly.
They had already worked themselves to death. Now they're in their 60s, which is crazy.
Well, it's Californication, wasn't it? Was the big one. That's what kind of got them.
That was the big one.
Them.
Yep.
Yeah. And they had like some big hits along the way, like Blood Sugar Sex Magic, but it was Californication that kind of got them into like a stadium rock level.
Yeah.
Of like Queen. It's kind of like that Queen level, isn't it? Like Queen, like a stadium rock. Like it's very the loftiest place you can get. I mean, the only metal band really that does that is Metallica, Iron Maiden. That's about it, really, isn't it? I don't know another metal band that could fill a stadium.
Tool.
Yeah, okay, Tool. Fair enough. Fair play, Tool. But that's it, innit? It's not much. There's not many. There's not many like big stadium-filling bands.
No. Yeah,
it'd be difficult to see which ones, who would be out of the new kind of a newer crop. Say bands that are from less than, younger than 10 years old, who are going to be like. There's obviously like Ghost who are quite big, but again, they've been around for quite a while now. So
yeah, they have, because they used to be Ghost BC.
Yeah,
I remember that. It's weird. I guess at the end of the day, you kind of got to pull from everywhere. If you really want to be a good musician, if you want to just be a guitarist, then that's fine, and you can learn that one particular or two particular genres that you really like. And I know a lot of people that are like that. They play blues and that's all that they play, and that's all they'll ever want to play, But to truly be a great musician, you kind of got to pull from different places and different avenues to, I don't know, kind of have revelations. Kind of like I did. Like I was all into the shredding thing and everything, and then, I don't know, Jack White, Queens of the Stone Age, and getting into blues kind of reined me in from doing that all the time and changed my playing style completely. So I guess you kind of got to be ever evolving, But
yeah,
to
100%.
To wrap it up for today, who's your favorite guitarist? You could pick one, you could pick two, you could put 10, whatever you want. You could put it down in the comment section. And if you're listening on iHeartRadio or any other type of podcast thing that isn't YouTube, we allow comments now. I just turned that on. So you can comment on specific parts of the podcast. You can
ask questions
and everything. Or you can ask questions.
That's pretty cool.
Yeah.
You can timestamp it.
Yep.
No way.
Mm-hmm.
So anything offensive we say, it can just be right there. Incriminating evidence.
Incriminating evidence.
We've even got the timestamp, Your Honor.
Chris is trying to be a guitar teacher and said he didn't listen to Led Zeppelin until he was almost 20.
Yeah.
You have it right here. But yeah, I guess that wraps it up for today. And next week will not be a special episode. We'll be back on the news and stuff like that. But we want to do, something a little bit looser. But with that, I guess we're out.
Bye.
Say you mean it one more time. So when you cry, know you feel it. Play it up and strike your pose. I need to know you really mean it. Maybe it's you puppets that I'm so afraid that I'll become. I never know when I'm right, never know when I'm done.